Hi guys, welcome to session 4 of our rolling bar. Today we have Atelier BRÜCKNER, SHIRIN BRÜCKNER, Hannah and SAIDA BRÜCKNER, friends, godchildren, and that's going to be a very interesting talk about scenography. And afterwards we'll have Peter CACHOLA SCHMAL from the German Architecturmuseum Damm. So we unfortunately started one interview in German, so please stay put. We're going to switch within the first few minutes. Okay, thank you so much. Welcome.
Also, liebe Familie Brückner, ich stelle euch mal ganz schnell vor. Also SAIDA, Hannah und SHIRIN. SHIRIN, du und ich, wir haben zusammen studiert, erst in Kaiserslautern, dann in Stuttgart. Wir kennen uns seit wir 18 sind. Wir sind aus 2 verschiedenen Allgäus, dem Schwäbischen und dem Bayerischen, und haben uns im Studium angefreundet. Und ich freue mich sehr, dass beide deiner Töchter meine Patenkinder sind, und ich bin mega stolz auf euch alle 3. Wir sind in der letzten Zeit noch mehr verbunden als sonst. Das Leben ist ja ein bisschen zweidimensional geworden, das heißt, wir schauen in diesen Screen rein und treffen nicht mehr zu viele Leute, aber wir haben versucht, 5 bis 7 Mal in der Woche zusammen Yoga oder Sport zu machen, und für mich war das das Überlebenstool. Ja. Also mir hat das wahnsinnig viel gebracht, auch dass wir danach immer ein bisschen schwätzen konnten. Hannah, ich fange an mit dir. Ich möchte dich, Hannah und SAIDA, ich möchte euch beide ein bisschen befragen zu eurem Studium, und ihr seid sehr international schon unterwegs. Erzähl doch mal ein bisschen, wo du studierst und was dir das gibt.
Also ich habe mich entschieden, in London Architektur zu studieren. Bin irgendwie durch Freunde dahin gekommen und habe mich dann entschieden, dort weiter zu studieren, nachdem ich dort so guten Anschluss gefunden habe und mich so wohl an der Universität gefühlt hatte, dass ich irgendwie das Gefühl hatte, das ist so der richtige Weg für mich.
Mhm. SAIDA, du bist zwar jetzt fertig mit dem Studium und hast einen ganz tollen Abschluss gemacht, wir sind stolz. Erzähl doch mal, wo du überall studiert hast, und dann könnt ihr vielleicht so ein bisschen vergleichen, weil ihr euch ja öfter unterhaltet, was die Vorteile von den verschiedenen Studiengängen sind.
Also ich habe in Zürich studiert, an der ETH, und habe dann noch ein Auslandssemester gemacht in Delft in Holland. Mhm. Und jetzt bin ich seit einem Jahr, wie gesagt, fertig. Und ich glaube, der Unterschied vielleicht von der ETH zu vielen anderen Universitäten, von dem, was ich jetzt gehört habe von Hannah, aber auch von Universitäten in Deutschland, ist, dass er einen sehr hohen theoretischen Anspruch hat. Also einerseits gibt es natürlich die Studios, in denen man die Projekte erarbeitet, aber gleichzeitig gibt es eine riesige Fülle an Vorlesungen, die man absolvieren muss auch. Und ich denke, da wird nur ein hoher Anspruch gestellt.
Also das Gefühl hatte ich auch immer. Ich habe für einige Leute gearbeitet nach meinem Studium, die von der ETH kamen, und da herrscht Zucht und Ordnung. Also das kam mir immer damals unfrei vor, weil das Planformat vorgegeben war und so weiter. Aber ich glaube, das hat sich inzwischen total aufgelöst. Und auch eine von unseren Kolleginnen wechselt jetzt an die ETH. Und was ich wahnsinnig spannend fand bei dir, du hast eine Zeitung mitgegründet für die ETH. Erzähl uns da noch ein bisschen was dazu, und erzähl uns was zu deinen ganz verschiedenen Praktikas, die natürlich auch angespornt sicher von deiner Mom waren, aber auch von deinem eigenen Anspruch. Erzähl doch mal von beiden Sachen.
Also die Zeitschrift, das ist das Trans-Magazin, die habe ich nicht in dem Sinn mitgegründet, sondern das sind wechselnde Co-Editoren, die eigentlich jeweils immer ein Jahr bleiben, und wir werden von der Universität unterstützt, aber haben kompletten Freiraum über was wir schreiben wollen, mit welchen Menschen wir Kontakt haben möchten, über welche Themen wir uns austauschen möchten. Und in dem Sinn war das eine riesige Chance, weil wir hatten die Unterstützung der Institution, aber durften auch gegen die Institution gehen. Und wir durften auch die Institution selber in Frage stellen. Das haben wir zum Beispiel auch mit der ersten Ausgabe, an der ich gearbeitet, sehr radikal gemacht. Das war das Thema Kritik. Und es ging eigentlich genau auch, es war eine Zeit auch, als die ETH selber sich so ein bisschen im Umbruch befand, da die alte Generation der Professoren langsam in den Ruhestand kam und eben neuere und jüngere kamen. Und diese ganze, vielleicht dieses rigide etwas aufgebrochen wurde. Und wir haben dann auch versucht, mit der Zeitschrift das zu hinterfragen, was sind die verschiedenen Unterrichtsmethoden oder auch, welche Situationen werden eigentlich geschaffen, in denen unterrichtet wird und in denen gelernt wird. Und ein starken Punkt, den wir da auch eingenommen hat, ist, dass wir quasi gefordert hat, dass die Architekturuniversität auch mehr wieder in die Stadt kommen sollte. Wir sind ja da in der ETH so oben auf dem Berg, quasi außerhalb der Stadt. Und eigentlich beschäftigen wir uns ja aber mit dem Lebensraum der Stadt und mit dem Gestalten von Stadt und Raum.
Da würde ich mal zurückgehen zu Hannah, die ja in London studiert und in einer Wahnsinnsmetropole. Hannah, was gibt dir London? Wie hart ist es zu überleben in so einer tollen Stadt? Erzähl uns mal ein bisschen.
Ja, also in London ist natürlich schon so, es ist eine unfassbar teure Stadt und alle müssen irgendwie schauen, dass man irgendwo irgendwie überlebt, ob das über kleine Studentenjobs ist. Also ich habe angefangen an der Universität zu arbeiten, indem ich den jüngeren Studenten helfe, den Designprozess aufzubauen, sowohl als auch irgendwelche kleinen Catering-Jobs und etc. oder Barjobs, die Freunde gemacht haben. Und ja, also das ist natürlich ein ganz großer Teil aller Studenten in London.
Mir fällt übrigens gerade auf, dass ich das mit euch in Englisch machen wollte. Sollen wir einfach noch switchen oder bleiben wir bei Deutsch? Shirin, Saida, Hannah, was meint ihr?
Wir sind komplett flexibel. We can switch to English or if you prefer, so that's no problem for us.
Okay, then let's switch, because then, you know, more international people can see it, and also your colleagues in London and at the ETH and in Zurich and Shirin, obviously your clients all over the world. So sorry for that. Back to you, Hannah. You told me many times that London for you is a major inspiration, and we all came to visit you approximately a year ago and a little bit more.
Yeah.
You know, we were doing this major culture tour. So tell us about it. How does your daily life look? When do you do that stuff? When do you even have time for inspiration?
I mean, obviously, in my everyday life, I'm not as much looking at all the cultural parts of London as we are when you guys are visiting. I mean, maybe as a little bit of a background, when you guys visit, we usually look at 5 museums in one day and walk around the city everywhere, which is obviously very difficult in the everyday life. But I think one thing that's very, very helpful for studying architecture in London is just the fact that you have all these architectural signs right at your hand, and whenever you're stuck with a project and need inspiration for something, rather than just being able to look at things online or in a book, you can actually go and visit places that could help you develop your project further. And I think this is something that's unbelievably rich in the city of London.
Well, Hannah and Saida, I will have a few more questions about the future and where you see your future, and I would say that your mom is going to do an introduction of her work, and then after that I want to know where you're going with architecture. You know, what's your fascination? I will go back to your internships all over the world, but for now I would say, Shirin, you have the word.
Okay. So, Ruthie, I'm very happy that we meet today in this format. And as you mentioned before, in the last 2 months, we somehow survived together this crazy situation in having digital meetings, mainly for doing connecting via sports. And I'm really happy about this format here. And I'm happy to share with you what I am doing, what my history is. And basically we met in our studies in Kaiserslautern and then came to Stuttgart and finished university there. And from then I somehow moved in the direction of museums and exhibition designs, which just came up by chance. And maybe I have some slides, and I just share my a small presentation about our office. So let me see this. Basically, our office is called Atelier BRÜCKNER, and we are located in Stuttgart, with working worldwide. We started in Germany, in Europe, and then all over the world. And we have a branch office in Korea, in Seoul. And basically, so next slide here, we are at the moment 100 team members in our office with 12 different disciplines. So we are thinking architecture and design from an interdisciplinary approach. And basically, there are, by working internationally, there are 28 different nations at the moment working in our office. So it's easier to say good morning than guten Morgen every day. We are concentrating on content-driven design, which is for museums, for exhibitions, for visitor centers, for expo pavilions. We are also doing classical refurbishments, interior architecture, and some target group dedicated projects like science centers and kids experiences. And when you sent me some questions, you were talking about challenges and possibilities, and I think this new digital world we are now at the moment trying to live in, it will never overcome the real authentic place which we believe in. And there's one project I just want to show, which is a project in Stuttgart, the Wagenhallen. It's a refurbishment of an old locomotive workshop to a cultural place. And for us, we always look what does the place, the existing architecture offer, and then we somehow try to show the different levels in history, levels in storytelling in facades, and somehow bring a new layer on it. And this is how we preserve the authentic place and offer a new approach to this place. Or one of our very early projects was the German Stock Exchange in Frankfurt. And also here, it was a place, a picture you see every day
on telly.
On TV, yes. And it's really a brand place which should be developed, and we somehow kept the most important elements, but defined a new image and a new place for that. Or another really interesting project about the authentic space is basically this textile museum in Augsburg, and it's an old textile workshop, and we are doing a museum about textiles in there, and we are showing not only the production but also the pattern making process in really emotional experiences. So I think the authentic place is still something which is really important, also in digital times, with Corona, after Corona, and so on.
I think, my next guest is Peter CACHOLA SCHMAL, the head of the German Architecture Museum, the so-called DAM in Frankfurt. Yeah. And, he just opened his museum again to the public last week. And he will talk about that experience. But I would say that people are running into museums and into exhibitions right now, like they really, really missed it. You guys told me that you have one-to-one concerts in Stuttgart, and that it's extremely touching and so good to be back and have some culture. And I think I was so happy to have that experience, to hear about that experience, and it really, I got the shivers, because after, so many weeks of not going to the theater, not seeing an exhibition, I think your work will clearly be influenced, but it will become even more important to experience that stuff. I think you have another presentation, SHIRIN, or
I want to also, it's not only the authentic place, it's also the to create a memorable space. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah?
things which people keep in mind, and which are highlight installations. And I think you cannot create this physical experience in a digital way. This is our project for Hyundai in Korea. We realized, where you see on the right-hand side on the bottom the design culture, which is a kinetic sculpture and emotional approach without being too didactic, but somehow explaining or giving an emotional experience about the design process. I think something everybody of us in our daily life and work have to do, and so we somehow visualized it. And as a maybe one more. Let me go back. And also, I believe we should make the content accessible. Yeah. Then we have these are nachhaltig. These are
sustainable experiences.
Experiences is to make content accessible, and we had the chance together with Snohetta Architects to work in the King Abdulaziz Center for World Culture in Saudi Arabia. And as you can see on the right-hand side in the images and the films, we did bring the unique nature of Saudi Arabia, which nobody knows. It's not accessible for people within the museum, to create, to tell content and create spaces. I think this is something at the moment we need to do and we should work on.
Thank you so much, SHIRIN. Also for my students here in Munich, I think they need to know that Atelier BRÜCKNER also did the BMW Museum.
Yes.
And that's really an experience worth to visit. And a friend of mine who is a jewelry dealer and does everything online and has 4 different screens, he's like, he told me, Ruth, my world became very flat. And, and also judging jewels just from seeing them on the screen and so on. And I thought that was very interesting. And now you showing us this very 3-dimensional experience. Thank you so much for that. I think your work is super impressive and also very international, and you're hiring so many different professions. Like, you don't just have architects, you have theorists, you have history people, you have interior architects and exhibition makers. And whenever I come to your office, I'm also totally fascinated by how you do your mock-ups and how you maybe tell us something about the process of coming up with ideas, because you have these huge moving walls where you pin all the stuff on. Tell us a little bit about that before we go back to interview the girls.
I think I show you just a video of our office, basically. Oh, not there anymore. Okay, then I don't do this. Basically, when we start working on projects, we always start with the content, yeah, and we try to understand the content and to try to convey the content, and then we do really large research on our sliding walls, on our pin walls, and make the content accessible for everybody. I believe in this time where everybody is working digitally, at the end of the day, you don't see what everybody did. And if we are trying to work within a team, we have to make the output of a day, of a design, as accessible for everybody and share it with everybody. By this, there's some kind of collaboration, a kind of interface can happen, and this is what we do on our pin walls we have, and what we really try to show everybody. And okay,
we can show the video at the end of this discussion. It's no problem if you don't find it now.
I have it, but we can show it now or at the end. You can. It's quite easy and simple. Let's see here.
So while you're searching, let me get back to Hannah and Saida. Well, you have Auntie Ruthie, who is an architect and an urban planner. You have SHIRIN, who is an architect and a scenographer and exhibition maker. We're not saying that we influenced you at all, but I don't know, maybe Saida, what kind of internships did you do, and where are you right now? Because it was so diverse what you experienced. Where are you now? What is your main road?
Well, I'm still trying to find out my main road. I think during the studies for internships, I tried out different things. I worked for OMA in Rotterdam, and there also I worked on a very classical architecture projects, and then I worked on some Prada fashion shows. So it was like also a complete diverse experience actually. And after this, I went to work for Olaf Eliasson in Berlin, which was again a very, very different situation or community there, because it's mainly artists that work for him, and there's a different work attitude towards projects actually. Mm-hmm. So and then now I think what I would like to do in the future is try to find somehow my points of interest. I mean, I started with doing a free diploma at the end of the ETH, where you choose your own topic, and so you actually think about what is interesting to you, what would you like to work on for a whole year, and maybe it's something that no one else is thinking about right now, especially something that is maybe at the border of what is considered the issue of an architect. I mean, in my case, it was something between architecture and infrastructure, but it can also become much larger into this kind of interdisciplinary world.
Thank you. Hannah, you are in the midst of your studies, and I came to visit you by myself once, and you were doing this huge, it's not even a model anymore, it was a mini mock-up of your design, and all the other students had to help you. Tell me where you're going, what you're most fascinated in. I mean, I don't, clearly that you have your mom, and that's a lot of influence, but I think that your family is open-minded enough to just let you go and develop your own interests, and also see where you go, even if you don't end up in the family office, Where are you at?
Well, I think similar to Saida, I'm maybe even further away from finding out where I'm going, because obviously I still need to do a lot more of my studies to get to a point of where I'm finished with it. But I think one thing that's really been a very big interest for me lately is like social architecture, and a friend of mine started this project in the south of Italy, in Calabria, where they're working on integration of refugees and working with an elderly society and creating creative spaces for integration and interactions. And projects like these, where students and architects and artists and locals, people from all over the world, can share interests and experience interests together to create a social environment. I think this is something that is very interesting and very exciting for me, and something that I definitely want to somehow pursue in the future.
Well, I can just say, guys, I'm so proud of all three of you. Saida, you're now working in an architecture office, doing one competition after the other. Hannah, you just offered, because you just had your final exams, you offered to help out on the rolling bar, or maybe do something else. So I will make sure to instrument you guys. Not that you're not busy enough. Yeah. Shirin, thank you so much for giving a presentation of the office, and we'll make sure to include a little studio walk, because people like that also very much when the Craftists gave us a studio walk, and it makes the studio more approachable. And at one point, we're all going to be back in our studios.
I think for us, Ruth, this is a really nice opportunity for me to be here with my daughters. Yeah, of course, I'm proud of them, and I think we are in a situation that I'm really happy that they follow their own way, that they try out what could be possible. And as you are working with your students on this project, yeah, I think it's nice to have different steps in the architectural life here together as a family, and I'm really happy about the power we all have together. And I'm looking forward to a future and to see how everybody develops and takes this chance forward, I would say.
Well, I think architecture is a lifelong path and a lifelong learning experience. And many of my teachers told me that also. My ex-boss, Professor Benisch, always told me that. And the more you experience and the more you go to different schools and countries and different offices, the quicker you find your own path. Maybe you will not find it until the end of life, but it doesn't matter. It's the journey that counts, I always think. And it's a tough one anyway.
Yes. That you understand in a way that there's nothing that is not touched by architecture. There are so many disciplines that are touched by architecture, and architecture is all around us, and there's nothing, no one can take himself out of this. I think this
exactly.
Yes, this is nice.
Final. That's. I couldn't have made a better final statement. Let's all work on the future. I think we have to. You know, we got a new challenge, and we're all thinking about how the future can look like. And thank you so much for this talk. Stay online while we show a little movie about your office. And goodbye to all our viewers. We have Peter coming up next, and see you on the other side. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Well, hi, Peter. Good morning. Peter.
Hi, good morning.
Peter CACHOLA SCHMAL, thank you so much for being so spontaneous. I know you're super busy with your new show and with your own talk series, the Jung series. We will also share a link to your own podcast live stream so that all our students and all the other viewers that we have, and we have hundreds of them by now, can join in your talks.
No, they cannot, because we are at the same time. Exactly the same time.
But ours goes into an archive, and yours is live. So we should be fine there. And it's all about supporting each other right now and having togetherness in a different way. Peter, we met at Günther Benisch's office in 1989 and worked on different competitions. As you said, now we're all in Heimarbeit, and the life is full of remote controls and Zoom screens and other screens. I have the feeling that for the first time we have more time to do what we always wanted to do or start thinking. Well, you're the one who's precise with birds, and after Benisch, we met again on your first show at the Deutsche Architekturmuseum Dam about blockmasters. Do you want to tell us anything about that?
Yes, it was a short window where we wanted to do something about the realizations, about the first realized buildings by digital blockmeister, as we call them. It was 2001, and strangely enough, there was not so much really built. Some of it by big practices like Zaha, for example, or UN Studio, or Foster, and so on. Some by small firms. But the interesting point was that it didn't take very long, and the whole movement quickly died away and faded away, and the very big practices took on, of course, the total digital workflow and integrated it into their normal workflow. And now even let's say, very conventional firms will have a total digital workflow, and the result might be something very conventional, but behind it is the total digital workflow. And the formal level of it that we saw in 2001 quickly disappeared, and some of the protagonists of the time went into professorship and never built again, like Colata and McDonald, for example.
My teachers, amongst others.
Right. So it was a very, very, very short time of interesting things going on. It was my first show at the Dam, and we had a fantastic opening with a fantastic conference with all the players in the field. I dearly remember that one, and the show traveled a bit, but we wanted to think about it 10 years later and thought if we should do that again. Now it's 20 years later even, but it looks like this whole topic of blob forms have totally disappeared, and only Zaha is still sometimes doing very strange things in Macau and so on.
Well, she can't do anything about it anymore.
No, now Patrick is doing these big things. But well, it was short, and it is over, and that was quite interesting.
But what I thought was interesting, because I was working at Essentot at that time, and I came over for the show to be the German ambassador, and it was so funny because everybody involved didn't want to be called a blob master. They didn't want to be framed into a box, right? Like, you're so blobby and so free. And of course, the beginning of these NURB surfaces, all you did, you took a sphere and you pulled the NURBs, and then you had a blob. And I was studying at Columbia before that, and that was just how it started. And you were for me, it was fascinating because Philip Johnson did a show about the deconstructivist at MoMA, also a very short-lived period. And you did the same with the Blob Masters. And so congratulations on that. I think it was quite a start you had there. And I think that Andreas Lepig is doing a show about exactly that period at the Pinakothek der Moderne. So it will be very interesting to see that old stuff, you know, because a lot of the stuff that they're getting, they don't even know how to find a zip drive anymore, or even the storage units that we used, they're not around anymore. So, but let's talk about the next big thing. I mean, you did many amazing things. Tell us something going from the topic of Heimarbeit. Tell us something about your Biennale curatorship 4 years ago. I think it was amazing, and it was during the time of the big refugee movement. Tell us how you realized this is something that's important to tackle.
Yeah, well, I had been in the jury for the German Pavilion before, which I thought is a fantastic thing. Everybody can sign up, everybody can hand in a theoretical proposal, and the jury will look at the best pieces that they read, and they will invite 6 or 7 shortlist teams to present their view, as you know. And I had been in the jury before, and then they asked me in 2015, do you want to be on the next jury for the 2016? And I thought, yeah, let me think about it. Maybe I want to be in the jury. Maybe I want to hand in something myself. So I was thinking, my wife said, "You're telling me all this stuff about the book you've been reading, which is this fantastic book about the idea of the arrival city by Doug Saunders from Toronto." So she said, well, maybe you should think about that one, because this is your life. You are you're yourself half an immigrant from your Filipino mother, and you know about that. And so, this is touching your field. And I thought, yeah, she's right. So I wrote a quick paper in July 15, and the jury convened in September 15. And in September 15, the borders were just opened, and we had these thousands of people streaming into Germany via Austria. And then the jury was sat down and decided to invite us. So in October 15, we were invited to present, and we had Doug Saunders along. We invited him from Toronto, and we were at the ministry presenting our idea. And they were quite impressed of the idea of Germany being an arrival country, which at that moment we saw. But Doug Saunders' theses are different than what the politicians in Germany think a rival country could be, because that's the most interesting part about it, that Doug Saunders was saying that whatever the planners and the politicians are doing, these immigrants, be they legal, be they illegal, these people will find their way, and they will form in certain parts of the city, which you could call arrival city quarters. And if you like it or not, they will be there. And then as a politician, as a planner, as an architect, you can do something about it, or you can hinder it. If you upgrade the slum or the Baguette Condo or whatever this place is called in your city, if you just eliminate it and upgrade it, then you will take away this very first step into integration into society. So we decided that this is interesting, but Doug Saunders is a political guy, political journalist. We asked him, do you mind if we take your book and formulate theses for architects and planners, because you're not one of them, but we want to make it clear what is important for architects to think about that. And he was okay with it. So basically, we did exactly that. We went into it, formulated a thesis, and this was our proposal for the jury, and they didn't like our idea of putting it into space. We had a different idea. They said, we believe you can do it, since you're the dumb, so do it. You have 7 months to do it. Decision in November, Biennale in May. And then we sat down and decided with something fantastic from Berlin, young designers, and they said, if you want to talk about opening the country, why don't we open the German pavilion?
Let me quickly ask you, I mean, you didn't just open the German pavilion, which was a major ordeal. You also started a major worldwide open competition on refugee homes. You know, it turned into modular housing, social housing. I mean, that for me was the insane side effect, and still going on. You know, tell us something about that.
So beside the pavilion opening, the thesis of immigration, the jury told us, well, we have all these refugees now. You have to do something about the refugees. And we said, the refugees are not the immigrants. This is two different stories. Many of them will be immigrants, but normally they're supposed to go back after a certain time when the crisis is over. And so we said, okay, because all these millions were being poured into refugee housing, but improvised, we called out to the architects, an open call, hand us in your project of refugee housing, but only if it's real. There were not many well-known firms that took part in the construction of a real project. And many people we asked, like you, had fantastic projects coming up, and there was a difficulty in really getting it done. We had many more, like your firm, who had really incredible proposals, but somehow it didn't work with the improvised doing that happened in those days. and only a few of the very good architects managed to get a job like that, such as the fantastic housing by Florian Nagler in Munich on the parking lot. That's one of the exceptions. The others were hardly known offices who handed in a project, and we said, we will just publish all of them on a website and in a booklet later, but we want the facts. And so in the winter of 2015, beginning of 16, we got the facts and showed them at the Biennale. So all these 70 architects who were with us were totally proud to be at the Biennale. But we said, this is not about quality. We just publish what is being built.
What's been built. But
terrible.
There's another attack I'm planning on you. We are doing a conference, not in Munich, but virtual in the fall, about the future of building. And I want you as one of the keynote speakers, because I think that what your competition started was in the end about something completely different. Like, for example, Nagler building above a parking lot, way beyond after the refugee crisis, a lot of people working with timber now. So, I'm amazed. You always seem to feel what's in the air. You always have the right predictions. And tell us something about the show that you just opened now. I just watched a talk with Hans-Ulrich Obrist and the head of MoCA, who were talking about the German museum directors who are so lucky to have people going into their museums again. Tell us something about your new show and how it relates to the time that we're in right now.
Well, this show originated in Munich 2 years ago at the Architekturmuseum Munich, TU Munich, with Leppik, and Hilde Strobel as the curator. It's the story of Neue Heimat. Neue Heimat was the biggest housing corporation in Germany, and they built approximately 500,000 units in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And they were owned by the union, by the Deutsche Gewerkschaftsbund, the German major, let's say, union holding, which was very close to the Social Democratic Party. So this union owned this housing, and they built these huge new towns everywhere. The interesting story is that because the union is the owner of such a huge firm that sort of managed to get rid of Germany's housing problems after the war in the 60s, that in the 70s they had practically eradicated housing shortage, but in the 70s the idea of people changed. They were not that happy anymore with new towns outside of the old towns. So, and this union had these thousands of architects working in this Soviet type of huge housing scheme firm, that they didn't know what to do with all these people if suddenly the market is not there anymore. So they went out and looked for new things to do because they didn't want to fire all their employees. So this big housing firm, Neue Heimat, started to go into big projects, being a project developer for huge projects. And they built the biggest conference center in Berlin, the ICC. They built the biggest conference center in Hamburg. And then they started to go out into the world. So they built everywhere in the world. They built things in Caracas, in Mexico, in France and Spain. They built a village in southern France. They built a casino in Monaco.
I had no idea.
These union guys, they felt like the masters of the universe, and they wanted to develop huge new towns in Brazil, in in Africa, and so on. But they didn't know how things work in these places. So they bought land, and then they had to get the politicians to agree, which they needed a lot of money to bribe them. And perhaps it didn't even work out because they didn't know how to do it. They bribed maybe the wrong people. So suddenly you had land but the project didn't go ahead. So they made millions and hundreds of millions of loss in their outside expenditures. And then it was discovered that the whole thing is corrupt, that all these union guys were making money on their own, that they were bringing in their friends and so on. It's like a Putin type of oligarchy. And it was a big scandal, and the whole union went down, and the whole company went down and bankrupt in the 80s. And basically, the idea of social housing died because of this scandal. And so,
a quick question for me in between. In your new exhibit, are you showing the history of Neue Heimat, or are you because it's called something with playgrounds? Tell us about what you're really exhibiting.
Well, the thing is, we show the history of this Neue Heimat company because we think that nowadays we have a housing shortage, and everybody is saying, so why don't we build social housing? And the idea, and the political thing behind it, why don't we build social housing anymore, is because of this company, Neue Heimat, and the way it was corrupt, and they discriminated against the idea of social housing. The politicians changed. We had a conservative government, and they decided none of this anymore. Let's give somebody that needs housing money. So let's fund the person that needs housing, and let's not fund the apartments. And so the person that needs money gets money from the states and can participate in the market. That was the idea. Now the market doesn't work anymore. We have a housing shortage. We have a housing crisis. The prices are going up. We have a zero. We have no interest anymore. So all the world is coming into Germany and trying to get into the market of housing. Prices are going up, and this system doesn't work anymore, and now we need new solutions. And we say, look, that's the point why it doesn't exist. And if you want, you could look at those ideas back then and see if there's something that could be interesting today, because we're trying to build new cities, but the new cities that we do today, we don't dare calling them new towns anymore. Munich had the biggest one of those, Neuperlach, but nobody in Germany dares to say this is going to be a new town. So this is interesting.
So you said before that the trend to create urban sprawl, like going outside, is not done anymore. That we move more within the city. So we have been talking about Heimat. You making Heimat with the Biennale in Venice, talking about Heimarbeit right now. Apart from your exhibition, and I can't wait to see it, what do you think is going to happen to our homes? What is going to happen to the idea of home, of Heim, in these times? You're talking about Neue Heimat, new homes. So what do you think is going to change in our own homes?
Well, this whole remote thing is hitting all of us now. Universities are going remote, as it seems. Some of them are even planning the year 2021 to be remote, which is kind of strange. If you go to Yale and you're not in Yale and you pay 50,000 and they give you your homeschooling, very strange. But on the other hand, I think this will have a super big impact because some of the ideas we have been trying to build up within the last years, for example, the idea of sharing spaces, having yourself a little less on your private unit, but maybe in a communal type of housing, a shared housing, you would have more communal space. This whole idea doesn't work with something like Corona. So people discover that living in the city itself is not really fantastic if you don't have a balcony, if you don't have a terrace, if you cannot go to green somewhere. So the idea of living dense in the city has lost its glamour. rich people fled to their second homes somewhere, and people discover living outside is not so bad. Having a contact to nature is very interesting. People don't trust public transport as much anymore, so those that had a car used their private car and were happy with it. And the idea of flying is, of course, being discussed. Nobody, as you know, the newest scientific research shows that perhaps all this idea of spreading the virus by surfaces is not that big anymore. More scientists are saying, oh, it's probably the aerosols, meaning the stuff in the air that carries on. If, for example, look at the idea of the vertical transportation lift. If the lift is a problem, then how will you ever revitalize the high-rises? A bank in Frankfurt has 4,000 people coming in the morning. If only 2 can use the lift and not 12, how long does it take to get 4,000 people into the building?
24 hours.
Yes. And how about them going down for lunch? Does that work? So the whole concept of the high-rise is being now attacked by the idea of distancing. How does distancing work with shared cars? It doesn't. We're not that anxious about touching things anymore because the virus doesn't seem to spread through touching of surfaces. It's more in the air. That's why singing is something more and more dangerous nowadays. So,
I only do it in the shower.
So religious groups singing seems to be one of the most dangerous ways to spend your time.
That is a crazy story. I mean, one person sick and 100 people infected the next day. Crazy.
Yes. So all these things, they go to the point that people say, in the good old times, you know, a room more is better than a room less. So the next apartment I will have should have at least one more room.
A big workspace and a space where we can take time out from whoever is with us.
Yes, exactly. So all these things we have been praying the last 10 years about housing are being very, very criticized. And I don't see that this idea of, for example, micro apartments, you know, who wants to stay in a micro apartment under quarantine conditions? Terrible. So,
and we're talking about losing, moving houses closer and closer together. We're talking about major densities in the cities. We will see how that works, because the medieval cities, look at Italy. I mean, they could just talk to the neighbor, and you know. Well, it's very interesting times that we live in, and I have the feeling that everybody, the two of us talked to so far in our lecture series, really have a lot to share and a lot of new ideas. You are an architect. You moved to architecture curatorship, and I always tell my students there's many jobs that you can get into and do after you study architecture. And I wanted to ask you 2 questions. First of all, how did you move from architecture to architecture curatorship? Because I think we were always very nice to you in the office. And secondly, are you thinking about new formats in the future of exhibition at your museum, the DEM?
Well, the first thing is easy. I went to work at university as an assistant professor, where you're supposed to open up your firm at that time, which I didn't. I started writing architecture critics. And then the position came up later at the Architecture Museum. They wanted somebody who was in the field of architecture and was capable of writing. And so I jumped into that. And and once you started, that's it. That's the way you go. And it's been quite rewarding, because my patience with architecture, let's say, building things and talking about projects for years and years and trying to follow them through after an exhibition win is, I'm not that satisfied with such a long breadth that you need for some projects. Remember Ingenhofen winning Stuttgart 21. He was 35 years and he's now 60, and it's not opened. And this is a very tough time of architecture that it needs forever. Sometimes some projects, you know that with Bonn, this is not very satisfying. No. On one hand, and to build something that you designed 25 years ago is also not rewarding, because you may have other thoughts by now, and then you're confronted with your own very young projects, and maybe you don't like them anymore, but you have to do them now. So this is quite difficult. The other thing, what are we going to do about it? We're not that sure yet, because we know that people want to go and see things in physical, and people want to go somewhere as a social act and go with friends and visit a show. I don't think that exhibitions in general have such a big problem. Maybe the idea of the blockbuster show has a problem, which for some museums was their way of business. So these museums, like in the US, the very big ones, they have very big problems because they're based on the income of the entry fees and the big sponsors to have a blockbuster, and that works if you have 300,000 people visiting and so on. This doesn't work, and so, which is fine for us. We're not doing the blockbuster show. We don't want to. Our house is not fit for it. So the idea of doing not that hugely successful crowded shows is very fine with us. We have a problem now that the new formats inside the show, for example, screens with the sound by earphone, is a problem because we have to take the earphone away. Mm-hmm. Then we have interactive things, terminals where you touch something, you better not do that now. So it's the good old analog things that work well, and we have to think about what can we do with less people but still interesting. So how will that be? Luckily for us, or unluckily, next year we'll have a big construction going on. It's renovation of the Dam in summer 21. And until everything is normal, which is maybe the spring of 21, maybe summer of 21, then we will move out for 2 years into a intermediary thing somewhere.
Are you allowed to go straight to the mine and have a few containers at the river?
Well, a container is another very dense thing. You know, you can have one person in a container. So a container show doesn't work. So we'll think about things then for next year and for then the 2 years coming. And in 3 years, when everything will be normal again, I'm sure, we will be back and we will see what happened so far. And in the meantime, we will try maybe to have more things where there's going to be participation in talks and so on, and not the focus not so much on the shows for the intermediary term. We will see, but things that we are doing now, for example, do have a big future. These type of lectures, talks, and so on, digital, they are pretty good. We do them themselves. We do them at the Dam as well, and we think there's a lot of future in that, and we will explore that.
And I think that a lot of people are starting these formats right now. There might be, I talked to Jürgen Meyer-Haar this week, and he said, who has time to watch all that stuff? But I think that, during lockdown, we all did have the time. We are gradually opening up in Europe. So I think that these formats will have to be later, or it will be more an interconnected thing. And the reason why I'm doing it is because our students, we're not going to see them until November. We don't have a bar. We can't communicate. They're not supposed to meet in big groups and so on. And I think if if we all use our network and talk about the issues at hand, I mean, we all don't have the solution yet, but I think that architecture is more relevant than ever. We will have to think or come up with all the solutions that we are faced with. Germany having a very old society, an overage society. We have too little housing units, so and now we have these extra challenges because something else might show up in a few years from now. So I think what you're doing as an architecture curator, as a communicator of architecture, it's very, very important. And Klaus Biesenbach from the MoCA, a German director of the MoCA, he quoted Richter, and I hope that it was Richter. He said that art is the highest form of hope. Would you say architecture is an equally high form of hope?
No, I wouldn't.
You wouldn't? Okay, I feared that, so tell us about that.
I don't think so. Architecture is not art, and art is not architecture. But of course, some architecture does have something that transcends the function and the building itself, which everybody can notice when they physically experience it. And with our less traveling, of course, this will pose a lot of different things now for us. If, for example, all the firms will continue with remote working, like I said, some of them are forced to, because the building will not accommodate such many people at the same time because of the lifts, for example. The same will be in New York and London and LA and Hong Kong and so on. Maybe in Hong Kong and Singapore, they don't care because they have controlled the virus, could be, and then they can still crowd into an elevator, but still, I think they are working remote at the moment still. And so for architecture and urban planning, this is a major field. And for the investors, those who invested in office buildings will have a second thoughts. Those that invested in big malls will have a second thought, because the future of sales, the future of stores are very, very endangered. Not only because of Corona, but in general. And so there's major things going on at the moment that will have impact on housing, on investing, on traffic. Cars are now very much in. We didn't want that, really. Cars and bicycles both have a future. The trains and the buses have a bit to fight against the idea that they could be spreaders. So this will have an impact on our societies, on our way we communicate, on the way we want to travel. We want to go to conferences or not. Big gatherings like the Biennale, as you know, has been a major fight behind the scenes until they made this decision, because nobody in Italy wanted to make that decision. They wanted to do it in September to keep the Art Biennale from happening as it was. But the curators and Hashi Sakim and the national curators were protesting because many of them couldn't gather the money, couldn't gather the workforce, couldn't go to Venice and so on to set it up. So it changed to May. The art will go to another year. This will have major impacts on all sorts of other things. And the idea of actually really going to Venice is quite a challenge, And so the idea of these, for example, exactly this week now, there is the decision within the German ministry if they will do the major show in September in Berlin, when Germany has the EU presidency for the EU Council. There's a major show planned. I was in the jury. Lukas Feireis and his team won. And they told me this week it will be decided whether this show will take place at all or not. it was supposed to be a Tempelhof. You can phone with Lukas. The show should be a Tempelhof main hall, which is big enough for any group.
He's on my list anyway.
Yes, if he's allowed to talk, that would be quite interested.
Yeah,
because his concept was very interesting, to bring architecture into the field of art, into the field of urban planning, mix it all, and try to make it relevant. And and so he was operating on the barrier between art and architecture. But he says, if they say no, we will get our honorary fee, but that's it, you know. We've been working one and a half years on that. And of course, this is, I will try to tell the ministry, go ahead, because nothing is worse for a curator team to, you know, at the end, not do anything, to just call it off and give you guys the money, but we don't do it. This is terrible. And the decision has not been made. And I hope they will continue with it. But the ministry is, of course, very sad that when Germany has the EU Council presidency, they cannot do a big conference with all the planners from all of Europe.
So maybe you consult them on other formats. You know, once it's decided, you know, there's always another way. And I think, you know, just lately I talked to a lot of friends and colleagues all over the world, and, you know, in every country, things are at a different stage. And maybe we will look back in a few weeks and we have a vaccine or antibodies, and we will look back at this series and think, oh my God, look at that. You know, I mean, it can go very quickly. See, I mean, there's hope every morning that it will go very quickly. And so let's just really hope for the best. I'm so very grateful that you were able to talk to us, and I could talk to you forever. I have so many more questions for you, but hopefully we can have you back another time, because we're planning on doing this into November. And it has been super fascinating to talk to you about all these topics. I learned a lot, and it will make me think in the next few weeks. Is there a final message you wanna give to our guys watching, guys and girls?
Well, the future is open. There will be incredible things going on, and I believe that the students of today have the best opportunities, because the next future will be in their hands, and we will need all intelligence and all capabilities to solve it, and it will not be done with the old solutions. So who is to find the new solutions, you know, if it's not the students of today? And in architecture and planning, there's so many fields now, questions now being posed. Like I said before, you know, the future of housing, the future of commerce, the future of mobility, transport, streets, cars, planes, e-mobility, flying, airports, malls, you know. The future of our whole field is quite open at the moment, and the answer is not there yet. Somebody has to find it, and it will be up to them to find it, and that's interesting, no?
Thank you, Peter, for putting that challenge out there to all the architects, all the young people, all the urban planners on this planet, and you know,
they are needed.
They're needed, and every time comes with their own challenges, and we are all ready to accept this. So, Peter, thank you so much. I send you many kisses and a big hug. Please stay online for some feedback, and thank you so much. We will stop recording now, and we see you on Thursday. Can't wait.
Yes.